He was a forgotten soldier who had nothing. She was a billionaire who had everything, except the one thing that mattered. If you believe a person's true worth is measured in courage, not currency, support our mission with a super thanks. And if you stand with the quiet strength of a soldier, leave a "Stay strong, Marcus" in the comments. Seraphina Sterling's world was a fortress of glass and steel, a penthouse kingdom perched atop one of Chicago's tallest skyscrapers, so high that the roar of the city below was reduced to a gentle, insignificant hum. From her corner office, she commanded a global financial empire with the cool, dispassionate precision of a general. Her life was a meticulously curated and ruthlessly efficient schedule, managed by a team of assistants, her days a blur of board meetings, market analyses, and decisions that could make or break fortunes. She was a titan, a queen of capitalism, a woman who had inherited a dynasty and doubled its value through sheer force of will. She had everything money could buy. The art on the walls was priceless, the furniture was bespoke, the air itself seemed filtered and refined. But the true, fragile and terrifyingly precious center of her universe was not in her portfolio. It was in the laughter of her 5-year-old twins, Leo and Lily, two small, bright sparks of chaos in her world of perfect, sterile order. They were the one part of her life that was not a transaction, the only asset for which there was no acceptable margin of loss. Marcus Thorne's world was 97 floors below, on the gritty, chaotic streets that Seraphina only ever saw as a geometric pattern from her window. His kingdom was the swaying platform of a construction elevator, his reality a world of sweat, concrete dust, and the raw, physical labor of building the very skyscrapers that housed the city's elite. He was a former Army Ranger, a man who had walked through the dust of Afghanistan and returned with a chest full of medals that paid no rent, and a collection of ghosts in his head that offered no peace. The transition to civilian life had been a brutal, disorienting demotion. The skills he had honed, the ability to read a landscape for threats, to move with silent, deadly efficiency, to endure unimaginable hardship, were of little value in a world that only cared about credit scores and resumes. He worked construction because it was honest, because the physical exhaustion helped to silence the noise in his mind, and because it was a job where a man was judged by the strength in his back, not the words on a page. He was a ghost in the city, a tall, powerfully built black man in a hard hat and a safety vest, invisible to the very people whose glass castles he was helping to build. Their two worlds, separated by a chasm of wealth, power, and experience, were destined to collide on a Tuesday afternoon in June. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and a deceptively gentle breeze was blowing in off Lake Michigan. Seraphina was in the middle of a tense video conference with her Tokyo office, her focus absolute, her voice a calm, authoritative instrument. Her twins were in the care of a new nanny, a young, highly recommended woman who was, at that moment, distracted. Her phone had buzzed with an urgent message, a small personal drama that, for a fatal 90 seconds, seemed more important than the two small children playing in the penthouse's sprawling living room. The living room opened onto a wide, triple-paned glass terrace, a sky garden 97 floors above the ground. The heavy, reinforced door was usually locked, a key kept on a high shelf. But in the last week, a service technician had failed to properly reset the magnetic locking mechanism after a routine maintenance check. It was a tiny, imperceptible failure in a multi-million-dollar security system, a single, weak link. Leo, always the more adventurous of the two, saw the door was slightly ajar. To a 5-year-old, it was not a danger, it was an invitation. He pushed, and the heavy door swung open onto the terrace. Lily, his loyal shadow, followed him out into the bright, windy expanse. The terrace was surrounded by a high, thick glass barrier designed to be unclimbable. But pushed against one corner of the barrier was a large, decorative ceramic planter, a recent addition by a landscape designer. It was a beautiful, stylish touch. It was also a perfect 3-foot-high stepping stool. From his vantage point on the scaffolding of the building being erected across the street, Marcus Marcus Thorne was on his lunch break. He sat on a steel beam, his legs dangling in the abyss, eating a sandwich his mother had taught him to make. His gaze, a habit he couldn't break, was constantly scanning his surroundings, his soldier's eyes noting details others missed. He saw the flicker of movement on the Sterling penthouse terrace. It wasn't the usual movement of an adult. It was smaller, quicker, more erratic. He squinted, his focus sharpening. He saw a small boy, then a girl. He saw them run to the corner. He saw the planter, and then his blood ran cold. He saw the boy, Leo, scramble onto the planter with the terrifying, fearless agility of a child. He was now high enough that his small body was above the top of the glass barrier. He was standing on the edge of the sky, the wind whipping at his clothes. Marcus didn't think, he reacted. His half-eaten sandwich fell from his hand, tumbling 97 floors to the street below. He was already on his feet, his mind a steel trap of tactical assessment. He saw the situation in a series of cold, hard calculations. Time to street level, 2 minutes, minimum. Time for anyone inside to react, unknown but clearly not happening. The only variable he could control was himself. The building he was on was parallel to Seraphina's, the gap between them a 50-foot chasm of certain death. But his construction site had a tower crane, its long arm currently idle, its hook and cable swaying gently in the breeze. The crane's cab was 2 floors below him. He moved, not with the frantic panic of a civilian, but with the focused, explosive energy of a soldier entering a kill zone. He dropped down 2 levels of scaffolding with a speed and agility that would have terrified a normal man, his boots finding their purchase on the narrow steel beams with unerring precision. He swung himself into the crane's cab, the operator away on his own brake. His hands, which had once operated the complex controls of a military drone, moved with a desperate, intuitive certainty over the crane's levers. Inside the penthouse, the nanny's scream, a raw, piercing shriek of pure animal terror, finally sliced through the calm of Seraphina's conference call. She looked up from her screen, annoyed at the interruption, and saw the nanny pointing a trembling finger at the open terrace door, her face a mask of white, slack-jawed horror. Seraphina's heart stopped. She flew from her chair, her meticulously ordered world shattering into a million pieces. She ran to the door and saw a sight that would be burned into her soul forever. Her daughter, Lily, was standing on the planter, her small hands reaching up for her brother. And Leo was on the other side of the glass. He was standing on the narrow, decorative concrete ledge that ran around the building, a space no wider than a man's shoe. He was holding onto the top of the glass barrier with his small hands, the wind tearing at him, his face a mixture of childish excitement and dawning fear. He was 97 floors above the ground, a tiny, fragile figure on the brink of an unthinkable fall. Seraphina's world went silent. The only sound was the frantic, useless beating of her own heart. She was a titan, a queen of a financial empire, but in that moment she was utterly, completely, and pathetically helpless. She could not scream. She could not move. She could only watch as the most precious thing in her entire universe prepared to be erased. From his perch in the crane's cab, Marcus's world had narrowed to a singular, terrifyingly precise objective. The chasm between the 2 buildings was no longer just empty space. It was a tactical problem to be solved. He didn't see the 97-story drop. He saw vectors, distances, and angles of approach. His mind, trained in the brutal geometry of combat, was working with a clarity that was almost supernatural. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. The crane's engine roared to life under his command, the powerful diesel motor a deep, resonant growl that was the sound of hope, of a desperate last-ditch intervention. His hands, steady and sure, moved over the control levers. The massive arm of the crane, a giant yellow finger of steel, began to swing, its movement slow, ponderous, and agonizingly deliberate. He had to be perfect. Too fast, and the momentum could send the hook and cable assembly crashing into the glass facade of the Sterling building. too slow, and he would be a mere spectator to a tragedy. He pushed the lever to lower the cable, the winch motor whining as the thick steel rope unspooled, the heavy hook descending like a lead weight. His eyes were locked on the small, fragile figure of the boy, Leo, who was now beginning to realize the true peril of his situation. The initial thrill of his adventure had evaporated, replaced by a stark, paralyzing fear. His small hands were losing their grip on the smooth, windswept glass. His face was a small, pale beacon of terror against the vast, indifferent blue of the sky. Marcus saw the boy's knuckles turning white. He saw the slight, almost imperceptible tremble in his legs. He was a human countdown clock, and the seconds were ticking away with brutal, unforgiving speed. "Come on," Marcus muttered under his breath, a prayer to the god of steel and hydraulics. He was swinging the crane's arm and lowering the cable simultaneously, a complex, three-dimensional maneuver that required an almost instinctual feel for the machine's rhythm. The hook, a massive, menacing piece of forged steel, was now level with the penthouse terrace. He had to get it to the boy, but the hook itself was a danger. A single clumsy nudge from the swinging, multi-ton piece of metal would be enough to send the child over the edge. Seraphina, frozen in the doorway to the terrace, watched the impossible scene unfold. The sudden roar of the crane, the movement of the giant yellow arm. It didn't register at first. Her mind, capable of processing billions of dollars in market fluctuations in a nanosecond, was completely overloaded by the raw, primal terror of the moment. Her universe had shrunk to the small, precarious form of her son. She was vaguely aware of the nanny behind her, wailing, her screams a useless, grating noise. She was aware of Lily, her daughter, still on the planter, her small face a mask of confusion and fear as she watched her brother. Seraphina wanted to run out onto the terrace to call to Leo, but a part of her, a cold, rational core that had not yet shattered, knew that any sudden movement, any loud noise, could startle him, could be the final, fatal push. So she stood there, a statue carved from ice, her power, her wealth, her entire empire, rendered utterly and completely impotent. She could only watch as a stranger, an anonymous construction worker in a machine of brutal industrial power, became the sole arbiter of her son's life. Marcus knew he couldn't use the hook. He needed something else. Attached to the hook assembly was a set of heavy nylon straps and steel O-rings, a rigging harness used for lifting pallets of building materials. It was his only option. With a series of delicate, precise adjustments of the crane's controls, he began to use the massive arm of the crane like a surgeon's scalpel. He nudged the hook assembly closer, until the nylon straps were dangling just a few feet away from the boy. He could see Leo's eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and a dawning, desperate hope. The boy was looking at him, a silent plea for salvation passing between them across the 50-foot abyss. "Grab the strap, son," Marcus whispered, his voice a low, urgent murmur that was swallowed by the wind. "Just grab the strap." He swung the arm a fraction of an inch more, the movement almost imperceptible. The nylon strap, caught by the wind, brushed against the boy's shoulder. Leo flinched, his grip on the glass faltering for a terrifying half-second. His body swayed outward over the abyss. Seraphina's world went black for a moment, a choked, soundless scream trapped in her throat. But the boy held on. The near fall seemed to break through his paralysis. He was a child, but in that moment, he was also the son of a woman who had built an empire, and a flicker of that same steely resolve took hold. He let go with one hand, a move of terrifying, desperate courage, and snatched at the dangling strap. His small fingers closed around the rough, woven nylon. He had it, a surge of pure, unadulterated relief, so powerful it was almost painful, shot through Marcus. But the most dangerous part was yet to come. "Wrap it around your arms, son!" he shouted, his voice a raw, powerful command that was carried by the wind. "Wrap it tight!" Leo, his eyes still locked on the crane's cab, on the unseen savior who was his only hope, obeyed. He looped the strap around his small wrist, once, twice. It was a fragile, tenuous connection, a child's desperate grip on a lifeline. Marcus knew it was not enough. He needed to get the boy off the ledge. Slowly, with a touch so delicate it seemed impossible for such a massive machine, he began to raise the cable. The nylon strap went taut. Leo was lifted, his feet scraping against the concrete ledge, his entire weight now suspended 97 floors in the air by a single small terrified hand wrapped in a nylon strap. Seraphina watched, her hand clamped over her own mouth to stifle a scream, as her son was lifted off the ledge and began to swing, a tiny human pendulum, out over the vast, terrifying emptiness between the two buildings. The image was a surreal, slow-motion nightmare. The wind caught him, spinning him gently. For a moment, he was facing her, his small face a mask of pure, abject terror, his eyes wide and unseeing. Then he swung back, toward the construction site, toward the man in the crane. Marcus's focus was absolute. He was no longer just operating the crane. He was a part of it. His nerves were fused with its hydraulic lines, his will with its steel levers. He began to swing the arm back toward his own building, a slow, steady, controlled arc. He had to bring the boy in, gently, without letting him collide with the steel skeleton of the rising skyscraper. It was a dance of 1,000 tons of steel, a desperate aerial ballet with a child's life as the prize. As the boy swung closer, construction workers on the floors below Marcus, drawn by the roar of the crane and the impossible sight in the sky, began to emerge onto the scaffolding. They were a rough, hardened crew of men, but they stood in stunned, silent awe, their faces turned upward, watching the life or death drama unfold above them. They saw one of their own, an anonymous man they knew only as Thorn, performing a miracle. Two of the men, their faces grim with determination, began to climb, scrambling up the scaffolding with the agility of monkeys, moving to intercept the boy, to provide a platform, to help in any way they could. Marcus brought the boy in, closer, closer, until he was swinging just a few feet from the edge of the 95th floor. The two climbers were there, their arms outstretched. "Let go, son!" Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with the strain. "They'll catch you. Let go now." For a moment the boy hesitated, his survival instinct refusing to release his one point of contact. Then, with a cry that was a mixture of terror and relief, Leo let go of the strap. He fell the last few feet into the waiting, strong arms of the two construction workers. They had him. He was safe. A ragged, spontaneous cheer erupted from the men on the scaffolding below. In the crane's cab, Marcus slumped back in his seat, the immense crushing weight of the last few minutes hitting him all at once. His body was slick with sweat, his hands trembling uncontrollably. He had just fought the most terrifying battle of his life, a battle where the only weapon was a piece of construction equipment and the only enemy was gravity. He had won. On the 97th floor of the Sterling Tower, Seraphina saw her son, safe in the arms of the construction workers. The ice that had encased her heart shattered, and a sound, a raw primal sob of pure, unadulterated relief, tore from her throat. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, the titan of finance reduced to a weeping, grateful mother. Her eyes were fixed on the crane across the street, on the small glassed-in cab where an anonymous stranger, a man whose face she had not even seen, had just reached across the abyss and handed her back her entire world. The aftermath of the rescue was a maelstrom of controlled chaos on both sides of the 50-foot gap. On the 97th floor of the Sterling Tower, the dam of Seraphina's composure had not just broken, it had been obliterated. The raw, guttural sobs that racked her body were the sound of a woman who had stared into the abyss and seen the absolute, irreplaceable core of her life nearly extinguished. The nanny, now a quivering, hysterical wreck, was being dealt with by Seraphina's head of security, a severe, impeccably dressed man named Arthur, who had appeared as if from nowhere, his face a grim, professional mask. He was already on his phone, his voice a low, authoritative murmur, initiating the complex protocols for a high-level security breach and a personal crisis. Paramedics were on their way. A trauma counseling team was being mobilized. The entire, formidable apparatus of the Sterling Empire was being brought to bear on the situation. But for Seraphina, none of it registered. She was on her knees, her hands pressed to the cold glass of the terrace door, her gaze still fixed on the construction site across the street, on the place where her son had been delivered back into the world of the living. Her first coherent thought, a single, sharp command that cut through the fog of her emotional shock. was for her daughter. She scrambled to her feet and rushed onto the terrace. Lily was still standing by the planter, her small body trembling, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a terror she was too young to fully comprehend. Seraphina swept her up into her arms, holding her with a desperate, crushing strength, burying her face in her daughter's soft hair, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of her child. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, her voice a ragged, broken thing. "It's okay. Mommy's here. Everything is going to be okay." She held Lily, rocking her gently, her own body still shaking with violent, uncontrollable tremors. She was a mother, comforting her child, but she was also a woman desperately trying to anchor herself back to reality. Her gaze was drawn again and again to the crane, to the small cab where the anonymous hero resided. Who was he? What kind of man possessed the courage, the skill, the sheer, unadulterated nerve to do what he had just done? In her world, heroes were a fiction, a concept reserved for comic books and sentimental movies. Her world was populated by predators and prey, by men who moved markets and manipulated fortunes, men whose courage was measured in their appetite for risk, not in the selfless act of saving a child's life. Across the chasm, on the construction site, a different kind of chaos was unfolding. Marcus Thorne was a hero, a fact that was being loudly and profanely celebrated by the crowd of hard-hatted men who had gathered on the 95th floor. They slapped him on the back, their rough, calloused hands a gesture of profound, masculine respect. They offered him swigs from their water bottles, their faces a mixture of awe and adrenaline-fueled excitement. The site foreman, a burly man named O'Malley, who was usually a font of gruff complaints, was speechless, his hand on Marcus's shoulder, his eyes glistening with an emotion he would have fiercely denied. Leo, the small boy at the center of the storm, was wrapped in a dusty but warm jacket, a cup of lukewarm coffee held to his lips by one of the workers. He was in shock, his small body shivering, but he was safe. He was whole. Marcus, however, felt none of the celebratory elation. He was experiencing the familiar, sickening aftershock of combat. The adrenaline that had sharpened his senses to a razor's edge was now draining away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weariness and a familiar, unwelcome tremor in his hands. He leaned against a steel beam, his gaze distant, his mind replaying the last few minutes, a critical, self-lacerating debrief. Could he have been faster? Had he been precise enough? Had he put the child in more danger by his actions? The soldier in him was never satisfied with victory. It only ever saw the flaws in the execution. The wail of approaching sirens from the street below announced the arrival of the official world. Police cars, fire trucks, and an ambulance were converging on the base of the Sterling Tower, their flashing lights a chaotic, silent disco in the afternoon sun. O'Malley, the foreman, snapped back into his role. "All right, you heard him," he barked, his voice a familiar, gravelly roar. "Show's over. Get back to work. Except you, Thorne. You're with me. The brass is going to want a word." Marcus knew what was coming. The police, the fire department, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. There would be questions, reports, investigations. He had operated a piece of heavy machinery without authorization. He had violated a dozen safety protocols. He had, in the eyes of the rulemakers, committed a series of profound and fireable offenses. The fact that he had saved a child's life would be a footnote in a report focused on liability and insurance premiums. He had seen it before in the army. The official world had its procedures, and a heroic act that violated those procedures was often punished more severely than a failure that followed the rules. He felt a familiar, bitter taste of cynicism rise in his throat. Seraphina's security chief, Arthur, was now on the terrace, his earpiece buzzing with information. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm and professional, a steadying presence in her emotional whirlwind. "Your son is safe. The paramedics are with him now on the adjacent site. They recommend taking him to the hospital for observation, but there are no visible injuries." Seraphina nodded, her mind slowly beginning to function again. "And the man?" she asked, her voice quiet. "The man in the crane, who is he?" "His name is Marcus Thorne," Arthur replied, reading from the screen of his phone. "Age 34, former Army Ranger, honorably discharged, currently employed by O'Malley Construction." He paused, He is currently being questioned by the Chicago PD and the site safety supervisor. Questioned? Seraphina repeated, a new, sharp emotion cutting through her relief, a cold, protective fury. He should be given a medal. He should be given the key to the city. Why is he being questioned? There are liability concerns, ma'am, Arthur said, his tone carefully neutral. Unauthorized use of equipment, numerous safety violations. The construction company's insurance provider is concerned. The words, so familiar to her, the sterile, bloodless language of her own world, liability, insurance, risk mitigation, sounded obscene in this context. A man had just performed an act of pure, selfless heroism, and the first reaction of the system was to calculate the potential cost. The injustice of it was a slap in the face. "Get me O'Malley," she commanded, her voice now back to its familiar, imperious tone. "The foreman, and get me the CEO of the construction company, and find out who their insurance provider is. I want them all on a conference call in 5 minutes." Arthur didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Seraphina turned and walked back into her penthouse, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. The weeping, helpless mother was gone. In her place was the formidable, ruthless titan of industry. She had just been reminded of what was truly valuable in her life, and a man she had never met, a poor construction worker, had been the one to deliver that lesson. The system, her system, was about to punish him for it, and she, Seraphina Sterling, was about to go to war with that system. She would bring the full, crushing weight of her empire to bear on this fight. She would not allow this man, this hero, to be sacrificed on the altar of a balance sheet. She had a new, singular objective: to protect Marcus Thorne. And when Seraphina Sterling had an objective, she was a force of nature that was not to be denied. While Seraphina was mobilizing her corporate army, Marcus was facing a different kind of inquisition. He sat on an overturned bucket in the dusty, half-finished office of the construction site, a space that smelled of concrete and stale coffee. The room was crowded. 2 uniformed police officers, a fire department captain, a grim-faced man in a suit from OSHA, and O'Malley, his foreman, who was trying to look authoritative but mostly just looked worried. They were not treating him like a hero. They were treating him like a problem, an unpredictable variable that had disrupted the orderly flow of their protocols and paperwork. The police officer, a young, earnest-looking cop with a notepad, was asking the questions. "So, you're not a licensed crane operator, is that correct, Mr. Thorne?" "That's correct," Marcus said, his voice a low, tired monotone. "And you were aware that operating the crane without a license and without the operator present is a direct violation of site safety regulations?" "I was aware," Marcus said. His gaze was fixed on a crack in the unfinished drywall, his expression unreadable. He was detaching a defense mechanism he had perfected in interrogation training. He would give them the facts, nothing more. He would not give them his fear, his adrenaline, his soul-deep relief. Those were not part of the official record. The man from OSHA, whose name was Henderson, chimed in, his voice thin and reedy, the voice of a man who lived his life in a world of regulations and fines. "This is a very serious breach, Mr. Thorne, very serious. The potential for a catastrophic failure, a dropped load, a collision with the adjacent structure. The liability is astronomical." He was not talking about the boy. He was talking about property damage, about insurance claims. He was translating an act of profound human courage into a column of potential debt. Marcus felt a familiar cold anger begin to burn in his chest. He had seen this before. He had seen a brave soldier, a friend, court-martialed for disobeying a strategically idiotic order, even though his actions had saved the lives of his entire platoon. The system did not reward courage, it punished deviation. It was designed to protect itself, not the people within it. "I made a tactical decision based on the immediate and credible threat to a human life," Marcus said, the words coming out flat and cold, the language of a formal after-action report. "The risk of inaction was a 100% certainty of a fatality. The risk of my action was acceptable." Henderson scoffed, offended by the military jargon and the calm, unassailable logic. "This isn't a battlefield, Mr. Thorne. This is a work site. We have rules for a reason." "The boy was going to die," Marcus said, his gaze finally shifting to meet Henderson's, and for the first time, a flicker of the fire within him showed. Your rules weren't going to save him. Just then, O'Malley's phone buzzed, a frantic, insistent vibration. He looked at the caller ID, and his face, already pale with stress, seemed to lose another shade of color. I have to take this, he stammered, holding up the phone as if it were a venomous snake. He scurried to a corner of the room, turning his back for a semblance of privacy. Yes, Miss Sterling, he said, his voice a low, deferential squeak. Yes, I understand. No, ma'am, of course not. Yes, I'll put you on speaker. O'Malley walked back to the group, his hand trembling as he fumbled with the phone's speaker function. He placed the phone on a stack of blueprints on the makeshift table. Ms. Seraphina Sterling would like a word, he announced, his voice full of a terrified awe. Seraphina's voice, crisp, clear, and radiating an authority that was absolute, filled the small, dusty room. It was a voice accustomed to instant obedience, a voice that did not brook argument. Am I to understand, she began, her tone as cold and sharp as breaking glass, that you are currently interrogating the man who just saved my son's life? There was a stunned, uncomfortable silence. The young police officer fumbled with his notepad. Henderson, the OSHA man, seemed to shrink in his suit. Ma'am, this is a standard safety review, Henderson began, his reedy voice now sounding even weaker. Mr. Henderson, Seraphina cut him off, the sound of his name a verbal execution. I have just reviewed your preliminary accident report, which your head office was kind enough to forward to me. It seems to be missing a key detail. It fails to mention that the only reason my son was on that ledge was due to a faulty magnetic lock on a terrace door installed by a subcontractor that your company, Mr. O'Malley, signed off on 3 weeks ago. It also fails to mention that the placement of a decorative planter, a clear violation of the building's own safety codes regarding barrier access, was approved by that same subcontractor. My legal team estimates your combined corporate liability in this matter to be, at a minimum, in the 9-figure range. The silence in the room was now so profound, it was almost a physical presence. O'Malley looked like he was going to be sick. Henderson's face was the color of ash. However, Seraphina continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, I am not a litigious woman. I am a grateful mother, and I believe in rewarding heroism, not punishing it. So here is what is going to happen. Mr. Thorne will be receiving a formal commendation for his bravery from my company, along with a bonus significant enough to ensure he never has to work another day in his life if he so chooses. The O'Malley Construction Company will be matching that bonus as a demonstration of their corporate gratitude. Any and all internal reports regarding this matter will state that Mr. Thorne acted in an exemplary fashion, utilizing his unique military training to avert a tragedy caused by the aforementioned equipment and procedural failures. Are there any questions? No one spoke, no one breathed. She had, in the space of 90 seconds, completely rewritten the narrative. She had transformed Marcus from a liability into a hero. She had turned their investigation of him into an investigation of themselves. She had used her power not as a hammer, but as a shield, protecting the one man in the room who had acted with true honor. Excellent, she said into the silence. Arthur, my head of security, will be down in 5 minutes to escort Mr. Thorne off the premises. Thank you for your cooperation, gentlemen. And then the line went dead. O'Malley slowly picked up his phone, his hand shaking. The 2 police officers suddenly found something intensely interesting to look at on the far wall. And Henderson, the man of rules and regulations, was quietly, discreetly shredding his notes. The balance of power had shifted so completely, so decisively, it had left an atmospheric vacuum in the room. Marcus sat on his bucket, a silent, stunned observer to the raw, breathtaking display of power he had just witnessed. He had seen generals command armies with less authority than this woman had just commanded this room with her voice alone. He had been a pawn, a grunt, his entire life, subject to the whims and agendas of powerful, unseen forces. For the first time, he had seen one of those forces, one of those gods from the machine, descend from on high and fight a battle battle on his behalf. It was a disorienting, humbling, and strangely intimate experience. A few minutes later, the man Seraphina had called Arthur appeared in the doorway. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and moved with the quiet, coiled efficiency of a man who was very good at his job. He nodded to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, if you'll come with me." Marcus stood up. The ordeal was over. He had been rescued not from a fall, but from the slow, grinding gears of the system. He followed Arthur out of the office and into a waiting elevator, leaving the stunned, silent men behind. He did not yet know that he was not being escorted off the premises. He was being summoned. He was about to meet the Queen. The elevator that carried Marcus upward was not the rattling, open-air construction lift he was used to. It was a silent, high-speed capsule of brushed steel and polished rosewood, its ascent so smooth it was almost imperceptible. Arthur, the security chief, stood beside him, a silent, imposing presence. He had not offered a handshake, only a curt, professional nod. Marcus was a package being delivered, an asset being moved from one location to another. He looked down at himself, at his work-worn clothes, his boots caked in a layer of concrete dust, his hands, despite a hasty wash, still ingrained with the grime of his labor. He was a piece of the street, a man of grit and sweat, being transported into a world of sterile, frictionless power. The contrast was a chasm, and he felt the familiar, uncomfortable sensation of being out of place, an intruder in a world that was not his. He steeled himself, his posture straightening into the rigid, at-ease stance of a soldier. He would not be intimidated. He had faced down men with guns. He would not be cowed by a man in a suit or a woman with a powerful voice. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. The transition was breathtaking, a physical shock to the senses. He stepped out of the confined metallic space and into a vast, light-filled cavern of a room. The air was cool and smelled faintly of jasmine and clean, filtered air. The floors were a gleaming, creamy white marble. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the city and the lake beyond. The same view he had seen from the outside, but now he was on the inside, looking out. The space was a temple of minimalist wealth, furnished with pieces that were more like sculptures than furniture, and a few vast, abstract paintings on the walls that he knew instinctively were worth more than he would ever earn in a lifetime. It was a beautiful, impressive space. It was also, to his soldier's eye, a cold and impersonal one. It was a display, a statement of power, not a home. And then he saw her. She was standing by the massive window, her back to him, a slim, elegant figure silhouetted against the brilliant blue of the sky. She was on the phone, her voice a low, controlled murmur. She was dressed not in a power suit, but in simple, impeccably tailored black trousers and a soft cashmere sweater the color of cream. Even from behind, she radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable self-possession. "No," she was saying into the phone. "Cancel the board meeting. Cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week. My children are my only priority right now. Handle it." She ended the call and stood for a moment, her shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly, the first crack he had seen in her armor of control. Then she took a deep breath, her posture straightening again, and she turned to face him. Her face was as exquisitely beautiful and as perfectly composed as her surroundings. High cheekbones, a strong, determined jaw, and eyes the color of a stormy gray sea. But her face was also pale, her eyes slightly red-rimmed and shadowed with the ghost of the terror she had endured. He saw not the titan of industry, but the mother who had almost lost her child. And in that moment of shared, unspoken trauma, the chasm between their two worlds seemed, for a brief, flickering instant, to disappear. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice softer now than it had been on the phone, but still carrying that same innate authority. "I'm Seraphina Sterling." "Ma'am," he replied, his voice a low rumble, a simple acknowledgement of her rank. He did not offer to shake her hand. "In his world, you did not initiate contact with a superior officer." She walked toward him, her movements fluid and graceful, her gaze direct and unflinching. She was assessing him, taking in every detail, his height, the powerful set of his shoulders, the quiet, watchful stillness in his eyes, the scars on his hands. The words "thank you" seem inadequate, she said, stopping a respectful few feet in front of him. Pathetic, actually. You saved my son's life. You saved my life. There is no currency in the world that can adequately repay that debt. He simply nodded, uncomfortable with her praise, with the raw, undisguised emotion in her eyes. I just did what anyone would have done, he said, the words a familiar, reflexive deflection of a man unused to being the center of attention. No, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through his platitude. That is not true. I watched from that window. I saw 100 of your co-workers on that building, and they were all frozen, watching. Anyone would have called 911. Anyone would have shouted for help. You were the only one who acted. You didn't hesitate. You didn't wait for permission. You saw a problem, and you solved it. That is not something anyone would do. That is something a warrior does. The word warrior hung in the air between them. She understood. She had seen past the hard hat and the safety vest and had recognized the man beneath. She had recognized the soldier. This recognition was a more profound and intimate form of gratitude than any amount of money could ever be. He found himself, for the first time, meeting her gaze directly. He saw in her eyes not the arrogance of wealth, but the sharp, assessing intelligence of a fellow strategist. She was a different kind of warrior. Her battles fought in boardrooms, her weapons spreadsheets and stock options, but she recognized the warrior's spirit in him. Just then, two small figures, a boy and a girl, came running into the room, their laughter echoing in the vast, quiet space. They were identical, with the same unruly blonde hair and the same stormy gray eyes as their mother. They were followed by an older, kind-faced woman who was clearly the new, improved nanny. The boy, Leo, stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Marcus. He stared, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and childish reverence. He was looking at his savior, at the man who had plucked him from the sky. He walked slowly, hesitantly toward Marcus. Seraphina watched, her face a mask of love and trepidation. Leo stopped at Marcus's feet and looked up, his small head tilted back. You're the crane man, he said, his voice a small, awestruck whisper. I am, Marcus said, his own voice surprisingly gentle. He slowly, carefully knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's level, an instinctual move to make himself less intimidating. You were very brave up there, Marcus said to the boy. When you grabbed that strap, that took guts. Leo's chest puffed out with pride. He had not just been a victim, he had been a participant in his own rescue. Marcus had just given him a gift more precious than any toy, the gift of his own courage. The boy, in a sudden impulsive gesture, threw his small arms around Marcus's neck, hugging him with all his might. Marcus froze, every muscle in his body tensing. He was not a man who was used to being touched. He was not a man who was comfortable with affection. But the simple, trusting embrace of the small boy, the feel of his small, warm body pressed against his, broke through a layer of armor that years of combat and hardship had forged around his heart. Hesitantly, awkwardly, he brought his own large, calloused hand up and patted the boy's back. Over the boy's shoulder, he saw Seraphina, and the look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated wonder. She was seeing a side of this quiet, formidable man that she had not expected. She was seeing his gentleness. She was seeing his heart. Lily, no longer shy, came and stood by her brother, her small hand reaching out to touch Marcus's arm, as if to confirm that this giant, mythical creature was real. The scene was a strange, impossible tableau. The billionaire mother, the forgotten soldier, and the two small children, a makeshift family forged in a moment of terror and heroism, huddled together in the heart of a glass and steel palace. Seraphina felt a powerful, unfamiliar emotion stir within her. Her life was a fortress, designed to keep the world out, to keep her and her children safe. And this man, this stranger from the world below, had not just saved her son's life. He had, in a single selfless act, breached the walls of that fortress and touched the protected, vulnerable center of her heart. She was a woman who was used to being in control, to making the decisions, to being the one who initiated every transaction. But in that moment, she was utterly, completely, and helplessly captivated. She was falling in love. The moment, so fragile and intensely personal, was broken by the discreet cough of Arthur, the security chief, who had been standing silently by the elevator. He held up a tablet, its screen glowing with a list of urgent messages and pending decisions. The world, with its relentless demands, was intruding once more. Seraphina tore her gaze away from the tableau of Marcus and her children, the spell broken. The brief, warm interlude was over. She had to become Seraphina Sterling, the CEO, again. "All right, you two," she said, her voice a little unsteady as she gently detached Leo from Marcus's neck. "It's time for your snack. Go with Mrs. Gable." The children, after a final, lingering look at Marcus, allowed themselves to be led away by the kindly nanny, their departure leaving a sudden, echoing silence in the vast room. The chasm between their worlds, which had been momentarily bridged, opened once more. Marcus stood up, the awkwardness of his position returning. He was a construction worker in a billionaire's penthouse, and the initial adrenaline-fueled purpose of his presence had been fulfilled. He was now just a loose end, a problem to be dealt with. "I should go," he said, the words a formal dismissal of himself. "They'll need me to sign some papers downstairs." "No," Seraphina said, the single word a quiet but absolute command. "You're not going anywhere. We have things to discuss." She gestured toward a sitting area, a collection of low, white leather sofas arranged around a glass table that seemed to float above the marble floor. It was an invitation, but it felt like a summons. She sat, her posture once again poised and controlled, the powerful matriarch back in her throne room. Marcus, feeling profoundly out of place, did not sit. He stood, his feet slightly apart, in the relaxed but ready stance of a soldier, a silent sentinel in her pristine white kingdom. "Arthur has informed me of the bonus that my company and Mr. O'Malley's have arranged for you," she began, her tone now more businesslike, the language of transactions a familiar, comfortable ground for her. "I trust you will find it satisfactory." "It's too much," Marcus said, his voice flat. "I didn't do it for the money." The statement, so simple and so utterly at odds with the ethos of her world, seemed to surprise her. "I know that," she said, a flicker of something, impatience, admiration in her eyes. "Nevertheless, the gesture is a necessary one, but it is also insufficient. A check is a crude and impersonal instrument. It does not begin to address the debt I owe you." She paused, her gaze intense, analytical. "I've had Arthur compile a dossier on you, Mr. Thorne. I hope you don't find that too intrusive." "I'd be surprised if you hadn't," he said, a hint of wry, bitter amusement in his voice. He knew how this world worked. Information was power. "It makes for interesting reading," she continued, ignoring his comment. "Distinguished service record, multiple commendations for bravery, expert in asymmetric warfare and risk assessment, fluent in Pashto, and yet, for the past 3 years, you've been working as a day laborer, living in a one-room apartment in a neighborhood my car is programmed to avoid. The system, it seems, has failed you." "The system doesn't fail, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice hard, the cold anger he usually kept buried rising to the surface. "It works exactly as it's designed to. It chews men up and spits them out. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last." His words were an indictment, a quiet, furious accusation aimed not just at the army or the government, but at the entire structure of power and privilege that she represented. She did not flinch from his anger. Instead, she met it with a look of cool, appraising intelligence. "Then perhaps it's time for someone to change the system from within," she said. She leaned forward, the predator in her, the deal-maker, sensing an opportunity. "I have a proposition for you, Mr. Thorne. I want to offer you a job." He said nothing, his face a stony, unreadable mask. He had been expecting a reward, a dismissal. He had not been expecting a recruitment. "My company, Sterling Global, has one of the most sophisticated corporate security divisions in the world," she went on, her voice now a smooth, persuasive purr. "We protect our assets, our people, our information across 5 continents. But we have a blind spot. Our security is reactive. It's designed by men in suits who think in terms of firewalls and surveillance cameras. They don't know how to think like you. They don't know how to see the world as a battlefield, how to anticipate threats before they materialize. They would never have seen the faulty lock, the misplaced planter. You do. I want you to run a new division for me, a red team. Your only job would be to find the weaknesses in my fortress, to think like the enemy, to protect me, my company, and my children from the threats that men like Arthur can't even see. It was a brilliant, audacious offer. She was not just offering him a job, she was offering him a mission. She was offering him a chance to use the very skills the world had told him were useless. She was offering him a chance to be a warrior again. He should have been tempted. The salary, he knew, would be astronomical. The power, the resources, it was a world away from the grinding, precarious existence he now lived. But he saw the trap. He would be her man, her asset. He would be trading his freedom, his anonymity, for a gilded cage. He would become a part of the very system he despised, a high-priced guard dog for the wealthy and the powerful. "I'm not for sale, Ms. Sterling," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "and I'm not a bodyguard. I'm not asking you to be," she countered, her voice sharp, a flash of frustration in her eyes. She was not used to being refused. "I'm asking you to be a strategist, and this is not a sale. It is a partnership, an investment. I am investing in your talent. And you," she paused, her gaze softening, becoming more personal, more direct, "you would be investing in us, in their safety." She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod in the direction her children had gone. It was a low blow, a deliberate, calculated appeal to the very sense of duty and honor that had compelled him to act in the first place. She was a ruthless negotiator. She knew exactly which levers to pull. He was silent for a long, agonizing moment, a war raging within him. The quiet, solitary life he had carved out for himself was a refuge, a way to keep the world and its complications at arm's length. This woman, this offer, was a breach of that refuge. It was a demand that he re-engage, that he step back into a world of risk and responsibility. He looked at her, at the fierce, intelligent, and undeniably captivating woman sitting before him. He thought of her son, of the small, trusting arms wrapped around his neck. He had, in that one impulsive act, already become entangled in their lives. He could take the money and walk away, back to his one-room apartment, back to his ghosts. Or he could accept this new, strange and dangerous mission. He could become their guardian, their shield. It was a choice between the safety of his solitude and the terrifying, unpredictable promise of a new purpose. "I'll need to set my own terms," he said finally, the words a conditional surrender, a slow, triumphant smile, the smile of a predator who has just cornered its prey, touched Seraphina's lips. "I would expect nothing less, Mr. Thorne," she said. "Welcome to the team." Marcus Thorne's transition from the dusty, anonymous world of a construction site to the rarefied, high-stakes environment of Sterling Global was less a change of jobs and more a crossing into another dimension. His new office was not a corner suite with a view, as he had half expected. True to his terms, it was a Spartan functional space in the sub-basement of the Sterling Tower, a windowless, concrete-walled room that had once been used for server maintenance. He had chosen it himself. It was a tactical choice. He did not want to be seduced by the view from the top. He needed to see the building's weaknesses from its foundations. The space which he and the small, hand-picked team he was allowed to recruit came to call the bunker became the nerve center of his new mission. His team was not comprised of corporate security lifers in shiny suits. He recruited a motley, brilliant crew of misfits, a former NSA cryptographer who had been fired for her whistleblowing tendencies, a social engineer who had done a stint in juvenile detention for hacking the city's power grid, and a grizzled ex-Marine Force recon sergeant who now worked as a locksmith. They were outsiders, people like him whom the system had underestimated or discarded, and they were fiercely, unshakably loyal to him. His mission, as Seraphina had defined it, was to find the weaknesses in her fortress. And Marcus, the consummate warrior, attacked his new objective with a relentless, methodical fury. He and his team began a systematic, top-to-bottom audit of every aspect of Seraphina Sterling's life, treating her and her children as high-value assets in a hostile environment. They saw not a home and an office, but a theater of operations, rife with vulnerabilities. They uncovered a staggering array of them. The sophisticated, multi-million-dollar security system was a marvel of technology, but its human element was dangerously flawed. They found doormen who could be bribed with a $100 bill, IT technicians with gambling debts, and domestic staff who posted pictures of the children on their private social media accounts, a treasure trove of information for any potential kidnapper. Marcus's team, using their unique and often legally grey skill sets, penetrated the Sterling fortress again and again. His hacker, a young woman who went by the name Nix, gained access to the penthouse's internal network in under an hour, demonstrating how she could control everything from the lights to the supposedly secure elevator systems. His social engineer managed to get himself hired as a temporary caterer for one of Seraphina's charity galas, walking through the event with a small, concealed device that cloned the security badges of half of her executive team. Marcus presented his findings to Seraphina not in a glossy PowerPoint presentation, but in a series of stark, brutal, real-world demonstrations. One afternoon, as she was in a meeting, the lights in her boardroom flickered and died, and the message, "You are not safe," appeared on the massive video screen. Another time, she returned to her penthouse to find a single red rose placed on her pillow, a rose Marcus himself had placed there after bypassing her entire security retinue by posing as a fire inspector. Each demonstration was a quiet, terrifyingly effective lesson, a practical application of the asymmetric warfare he knew so well. He was showing her that her fortress of wealth was an illusion, that true security was not about technology, but about discipline, vigilance, and understanding the human element. Seraphina, to her credit, was not angered by his methods. She was impressed. She was a woman who respected results, and Marcus was delivering them. She approved every one of his recommendations, funded every upgrade, and gave him an unprecedented level of autonomy and authority. A slow, grudging professional respect began to grow between them. They were two commanders from different worlds, speaking the shared language of strategy and power, but beneath the professional, a deeper, more personal connection was also beginning to form. Marcus, in the course of his work, was forced to be in close proximity to Seraphina and her children. He became a shadow in their lives, a quiet, watchful presence. He would observe the children's routines, their routes to and from their exclusive private school, the security protocols at their weekend home in the country. And in doing so, he began to see a side of Seraphina that the world never saw. He saw the way she would drop everything, a billion-dollar deal hanging in the balance, to take a call from one of the twins. He saw the unguarded, tender look on her face as she read them a bedtime story. He saw the fierce, almost animalistic protectiveness in her eyes. He saw the mother, not the mogul. He also saw her loneliness. He saw that her life, for all its power and glamour, was an isolated one. She was surrounded by employees, by rivals, by sycophants, but she had no equals, no partners, no one she could truly trust, except perhaps for him. She, in turn, began to see the man behind the soldier's mask. She insisted on weekly face-to-face briefings, not in a boardroom, but in her private study after the children were in bed. Over glasses of whiskey she knew he preferred, they would talk, ostensibly about security, but their conversations would invariably drift into more personal territory. She found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about the immense, crushing pressure of her father's legacy, about her failed, loveless marriage to a man who had been more interested in her portfolio than in her heart, about the constant gnawing fear that her wealth would somehow poison her children, robbing them of a normal, happy life. He was a quiet, profound listener. He did not offer easy platitudes or sycophantic advice. He would simply listen, his gaze steady and intelligent, and occasionally offer a quiet, insightful observation that cut through the noise and got to the heart of the matter. He became her confidant, her confessor, the one person in her life who was not intimidated by her power and who was not trying to get something from her. He wanted nothing from her except her safety, and that, she realized, was the most precious and seductive thing a man had ever offered her. The physical attraction that had sparked between them in that first, traumatic meeting was now a low, constant hum beneath the surface of their every interaction. They were both intensely disciplined, controlled individuals, masters of suppressing their own emotions, but they could not suppress the pull that was growing between them. It was there in the lingering glances across a room, the way they would unconsciously mirror each other's posture, the electric awareness of each other's physical presence when they were in the same space. It was a dangerous, unspoken thing, a breach of the professional protocol that defined their relationship, but it was also undeniable. The crisis came to a head one rainy autumn evening. Marcus had been working late in the bunker, and Seraphina had called him up to the penthouse for an urgent consultation. When he arrived, he found her alone, the children away with their grandparents. The urgency was a pretense. She was dressed in a simple silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand, her hair down, the usual formidable armor of her corporate persona completely gone. She looked vulnerable, beautiful, and profoundly lonely. "I'm a fraud, Marcus," she said, her voice a low, unsteady whisper as she stared out at the rain-streaked city lights. "I project this image of strength, of control, but the truth is, I'm terrified every single day, terrified of failing, of not being enough for my children, of someone finding the one weak link in my armor and destroying everything." She turned to him, her stormy gray eyes full of a raw, desperate plea. "Since the day you saved Leo, you have been the only thing that makes me feel safe. You have become the one solid thing in my entire chaotic world." He stood, rooted to the spot, a war raging within him. His every instinct, every ounce of his professional discipline screamed at him to maintain his distance, to retreat to the safety of his role as her employee, her protector. This was a line that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. It would compromise the mission. It would compromise everything. But the man in him, the man who had been starved for a genuine human connection, the man who had found himself against all odds falling in love with this fierce, brilliant, and vulnerable woman, could not retreat. He walked toward her, slowly closing the space between them. He reached out, his hand gently touching her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, Seraphina," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. "But even the strongest soldiers need someone to stand watch with them in the dark." And then he kissed her. It was not the desperate, hungry kiss of their imagined future, but a slow, gentle, and profoundly tender kiss. A kiss that was a surrender, an acknowledgement of a truth that had become too powerful to deny. The walls of her fortress and of his had finally, completely come tumbling down. The kiss was a Rubicon crossed, a silent declaration that changed the very landscape of their lives. In the quiet, rain-lashed intimacy of the penthouse, the rigidly defined roles of employer and employee, of protector and protected, dissolved, leaving only a man and a woman stripped bare of their armor. Their coming together was not a whirlwind of reckless passion, but a slow, deliberate exploration, a mapping of new and treacherous territory. It was imbued with a sense of profound, almost reverent gravity. They were two seasoned, cautious warriors, and they understood the immense risk of this emotional surrender. For Seraphina, it was the first time in her adult life that she had allowed herself to be truly vulnerable with a man. Her previous relationships, including her marriage, had been strategic alliances, partnerships of convenience and power. She had never allowed a man to see the cracks in her facade, the fear and the loneliness that resided beneath the surface of the indomitable CEO. With Marcus, she felt, for the first time, that she did not have to pretend. He had already seen her at her most helpless, at her most broken. He had not judged her or tried to exploit her weakness. He had simply protected her. This act of selfless strength had earned him a level of trust she had never afforded another human human being. For Marcus, the experience was equally profound and equally terrifying. He was a man who had built his life around the principles of control, discipline, and emotional detachment. These were the tools that had kept him alive on the battlefield and sane in the quiet, lonely years that followed. To let someone into the carefully guarded fortress of his heart was a violation of his most deeply ingrained protocols. But Amara was not an intruder. She was a liberator. Her presence in his life, her quiet, unwavering belief in him, had begun to heal wounds he had thought were fatal. She saw not the broken, discarded soldier, but the honorable, capable man. She did not want to fix him. She simply wanted to stand with him. This unconditional acceptance was a gift he had never been given, and it was a gift he was powerless to refuse. Their night together was a slow, quiet unfolding of secrets, both physical and emotional. They made love with a tenderness and an intensity that was born of a deep, soul-level recognition. It was a confirmation of the bond that had been forged in a moment of shared terror and had been growing silently in the spaces between their professional lives. In the morning, a new, unspoken reality settled over the penthouse. The world outside had not changed. She was still a billionaire CEO, and he was still the head of her security. But the space between them was now charged with a new, dangerous intimacy. They were co-conspirators, guardians of a secret that could, if revealed, have devastating consequences. The corporate world, with its rigid hierarchies and unforgiving scrutiny, would never understand or accept a relationship between the Queen and her sentinel. It would be seen as a weakness, a liability, a scandal that her rivals and the board of directors would seize upon with predatory glee. They both understood this instinctively, and so began a new, more complex mission, the concealment of their love. Their relationship became a clandestine operation, a series of stolen moments and coded conversations conducted in the deep of the night, in the secure, soundproof sanctuary of the penthouse, after the children were asleep and the world was locked out. The bunker in the sub-basement became not just Marcus's professional headquarters, but also a kind of secret command post for their personal lives. It was the one place they could be together, surrounded by the sterile, impersonal hum of servers and surveillance equipment, a strange, modern-day fortress for a love that had to live in the shadows. This duality was a heavy burden, especially for Marcus. By day, he was Mr. Thorne, the quiet, formidable security chief, his demeanor with Seraphina in public meticulously professional, their interactions formal and brief. He would refer to her as Ms. Sterling, his face an unreadable mask. He would stand in the background at board meetings, a silent, watchful shadow, while the woman he had held in his arms the night before commanded the room with her brilliant, ruthless intellect. The strain of this constant performance was immense. He was a man who valued honesty and directness above all else, and the life of deception he was now living was a constant, low-grade poison to his soul. But he endured it for her. He knew that any slip, any moment of unguarded intimacy could give her enemies the ammunition they needed to hurt her, and his primary mission, above all else, was to protect her. Seraphina, for her part, found a new quiet joy in their secret life. For the first time, she had a part of her life that was completely hers, a secret garden that was not connected to her family's name or her company's stock price. Their clandestine meetings were a source of profound comfort and strength. With Marcus, she could shed the heavy, suffocating mantle of her public persona. She could be just Seraphina. She found herself confiding in him, relying on his calm, steady judgment, not just in matters of security, but in the complex, treacherous politics of her corporate life. He became her secret advisor, her shadow cabinet of one. His soldier's mind, so adept at seeing through deception and identifying hidden agendas, was an invaluable asset. He could read the subtle power dynamics in a boardroom with the same skill he had once used to read a hostile landscape. He saw the predators, the sycophants, the hidden weaknesses in her own team. He became her most trusted ally in every sense of the word. Their love also began to change her. The people around her, the ones who knew her best, began to notice a subtle shift. The icy, formidable CEO was still there, but there was a new warmth in her eyes, a new readiness to her smile. She was a little less ruthless, a little more compassionate. Her relationship with her children, which had always been loving but slightly distant, constrained by the demands of her schedule, deepened. Marcus, in his quiet, unobtrusive way, had taught her the value of being present. He had shown her that true security was not about building higher walls, but about fostering stronger connections. She started leaving the office earlier. She took her children to the park herself, albeit with Marcus and his team watching from a discreet distance. She was rediscovering a part of herself she had thought was lost forever. The woman, not the CEO, but a secret of this magnitude in a world as scrutinized as hers, could not stay hidden forever. The first crack in their fortress of secrecy came from an unexpected source. Her children. Leo, who hero-worshipped Marcus, began to talk. At a dinner party with some of her oldest and most powerful family friends, he announced, with the innocent, unfiltered honesty of a child, that Marcus is Mommy's best friend. He tucks her in at night. The comment was met with a moment of stunned, awkward silence, which Seraphina managed to paper over with a brittle laugh and a quick change of the subject. But the seed of suspicion had been planted. Rumors began to circulate, quiet, vicious whispers in the exclusive country clubs and charity galas that were the battlegrounds of her social world. The story of the heroic rescue was retold, but with a new, cynical twist. Had it been a setup? Was the handsome, mysterious security chief using his position to insinuate himself into the life of the lonely, vulnerable billionaire widow? The real threat, however, came from within her own company. A rival on the board of directors, a man named Charles Worthington, who had always resented her power and believed he was the rightful heir to the Sterling Empire, began to see the rumors as an opportunity. He was a shrewd, patient predator, and he began to watch, to gather information. He used the company's own internal security resources, men loyal to him, to conduct a quiet, off-the-books investigation into Marcus Thorne. He dug into his past, looking for a weakness, a piece of leverage he could use to discredit him, and by extension, to destabilize Seraphina's control of the company. The walls were closing in. Marcus and Seraphina could feel it. The quiet, stolen moments of peace and intimacy were becoming tainted with a new sense of urgency, of impending danger. Their secret love, which had been a source of strength and sanctuary, was now becoming their greatest vulnerability, a weapon that was about to be used against them. The war they had been fighting against the outside world was about to turn inward, and the next battle would be fought not on a construction site or in a boardroom, but for the very heart and soul of the Sterling Empire. The attack, when it came, was not a frontal assault but a quiet corporate assassination, executed with the bloodless, surgical precision of a boardroom coup. Charles Worthington, Seraphina's longtime rival, made his move at the annual shareholders' meeting, an event that was usually a carefully choreographed piece of corporate theater. He did not make a scene. He did not raise his voice. He simply used the new business portion of the agenda to raise a matter of grave concern regarding corporate governance and executive judgment. With the quiet, confident malice of a man who knows he holds a winning hand, he presented the board and the assembled shareholders with a special report on security irregularities. It was a masterpiece of innuendo and carefully selected facts. It detailed the unprecedented and fiscally irresponsible salary and autonomy that had been granted to Mr. Thorne. It included security logs that showed Marcus's access to the executive floors at late, unprofessional hours. It even included grainy, long-lens photographs taken by a private investigator of Marcus and Seraphina on the penthouse terrace one night, their heads close together in what was clearly an intimate conversation. Worthington did not explicitly state that they were having an affair. He didn't have to. He simply painted a picture of a compromised, emotionally vulnerable CEO who had been unduly influenced by a charismatic but unqualified subordinate. He framed Marcus not as a hero, but as a cunning opportunist who had leveraged a single lucky incident into a position of immense power. He then played his trump card. He had dug deep into Marcus's military past, and he had found the one shadow, the one piece of leverage he needed. "Our investigation," Worthington said, his voice dripping with false concern, "has also uncovered a troubling incident from Mr. Thorne's final tour of duty, an operation that resulted in the deaths of 2 of his men. While he was officially cleared of wrongdoing by an internal military review, a review which we now have reason to believe was incomplete, there have always been persistent, unofficial whispers of a catastrophic failure in his judgment under fire. It was a lie, a vicious, twisted distortion of the truth. The operation had been a catastrophic failure, but it had been a failure of intelligence from on high, not of Marcus's leadership. He had been cleared because he was a hero who had saved the rest of his team from a botched, ill-conceived mission. But Worthington presented it as a dark, unresolved question mark, a stain on Marcus's character. He had weaponized Marcus's honor, turning his sacrifice into a liability. The effect on the room was devastating. The shareholders, a notoriously conservative and risk-averse group, began to murmur. The other board members, most of whom were already wary of Seraphina's growing reliance on her mysterious security chief, exchanged worried, knowing glances. Seraphina sat at the head of the long, polished table, a queen under siege. She felt a cold, familiar fury rise within her, but she knew that any emotional outburst, any passionate defense of Marcus, would only serve to confirm Worthington's narrative of her as a compromised, irrational woman. She was trapped. Worthington had not just attacked Marcus, he had attacked her judgment, her authority, her very fitness to lead. He concluded his presentation with emotion, an immediate, independent inquiry into the security division and the immediate suspension of Mr. Thorne, pending the outcome of that inquiry. It was a checkmate. If she voted against the motion, she would appear to be covering up a scandal. If she voted for it, she would be betraying the man she loved. Marcus watched the proceedings on a secure video feed in the bunker, a silent, stoic observer to his own character assassination. He felt no surprise, only a deep, weary resignation. He had known this was coming. He had warned Seraphina about Worthington, had identified him as the primary internal threat months ago. The use of his service record was a low, dirty blow, but it was also a tactically sound one. It was the one part of his life he could not easily defend without revealing classified details of a mission that was still shrouded in government secrecy. He saw the impossible position Seraphina was in, the cruel, brilliant trap that Worthington had set for her. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. A soldier's duty is not just to fight, it is also to know when a strategic sacrifice is necessary to save the mission. And the mission, he knew, was not about him, it was about her. It was about protecting her, her children, and the empire she had built. Before the board could vote, Seraphina's private phone, the one on the table in front of her, buzzed. It was a text message from Marcus. It contained only 3 words: "I resign now." The message was a lifeline. It was a grenade he was throwing himself on to save her. It was an act of profound, selfless love and loyalty. It was his resignation, his sacrifice, his final act as her soldier. It gave her the one and only way out of the trap. She looked up from her phone, her face a mask of cold, regal composure. "That will not be necessary, Charles," she said, her voice ringing with a renewed, icy authority. "I have just received and accepted Mr. Thorne's resignation, effective immediately. He has chosen to step down to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest while the company reviews its security protocols. I, of course, will fully cooperate with any inquiry the board deems necessary." She had done it. She had accepted his sacrifice. She had cut him loose, publicly, in front of her entire company. The words felt like shards of glass in her own throat. She had saved her company, but she had lost her partner. Worthington, though momentarily surprised by the speed of this development, looked smug. He had won. He had removed his rival and weakened the Queen, all in one elegant move. That night, the penthouse, which had become their sanctuary, felt like a mausoleum. Marcus was there, packing his few belongings into a single duffel bag. The quiet domestic intimacy they had built was gone, replaced by a deep, aching silence. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice a raw whisper. She was standing in the doorway of the guest room he had used, watching him, her heart breaking with every neat, methodical fold of his clothes. "Yes, I did," he said, his back still to her, his voice rough. "It was the only move. He had you pinned. My presence in this company, in your life, was being used as a weapon against you. A good soldier knows when he is compromising the objective. I had to remove myself from the board." "This isn't a battlefield, Marcus," she cried, the frustration and the grief finally breaking through her control. "This is our life." He finally turned to face her, and the raw, unguarded pain in his eyes was a mirror of her own. "For me, it has always been a battlefield, Seraphina," he said, his voice full of a deep, weary sadness. "I don't know how to live any other way. I can protect you from a threat. I can take a bullet for you, but I don't know how to protect you from me, from the scandal of being with a man like me. I am a ghost, a liability, and I will not be the reason you lose everything you have built. I don't care about the company," she said, tears now streaming down her face. "I care about you. We can fight this together." "No," he said, and his voice was gentle but absolute, the voice of a man who has made a decision from which he will not be moved. "Your fight is here in this boardroom. You have to stay and hold your ground. You have to destroy Worthington. You cannot show any weakness. And my being here, even in secret, is a weakness. They will be watching you, watching this penthouse. We can't continue." He walked over to her, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "This is not a retreat," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "It is a tactical redeployment. I am just going dark for a while. You have a war to win. Win it, and when it's over, I will be waiting." He gave her one last, deep and desperate kiss, a kiss that was a promise and a farewell, and then he was gone. He picked up his duffel bag, walked to the service elevator, and disappeared from her life as quietly and as suddenly as he had entered it. Seraphina was left alone in the silent, echoing grandeur of her glass and steel fortress, the queen once again alone on her throne. But this time, she was not just a CEO fighting for her company. She was a woman fighting for her future, fueled by a cold, righteous fury and the memory of a good soldier's sacrifice. Worthington thought he had won the battle. He had no idea that he had just started a war with a woman who had nothing left to lose. Your support through Super Thanks ensures that the fire of these memories, these powerful stories of sacrifice and unbreakable will never be extinguished. Thank you for being a keeper of the flame.